Good afternoon, and welcome to this week's edition of Law is Stranger Than Fiction. I'm Barry Shull, one of the co-hosts and a shareholder at the law firm of Richards, Brant, Miller, Nelson in Salt Lake City.
I'm your other co-host, Stephen Bergman. I'm also a shareholder at Richards, Brant, Miller, Nelson.
And today Stephen's going to introduce us to a somewhat alarming concept that was new to both of us, known as pet leasing. Stephen, take it away.
Thank you. It's new to a lot of people, actually. I learned about this from a Federal Trade Commission consumer warning to be very careful when purchasing a pet. If you're not buying the pet outright for cash at the time, read very carefully the contract that the pet store gives to you. Because unfortunately, a number of people have ended up what they think was buying a pet and ended up instead actually signing a lease agreement on a pet.
So wait a minute, you're telling me that it's possible to lease a dog, a cat, a ferret, a parrot, whatever it might be, in the same way that you might lease a widescreen TV?
Well, for these stores that were doing it, pretty much, yeah. That's what was going on. Instead of paying, the say $1,000 or $1,300, whatever the animal in question might cost, they were agreeing to make payments, typically over a 2-year period. The payments would have come out to far greater than the purchase price would have been at the time. And the contract that these people sign, probably not reading very carefully because they're so enamored with whatever animal they're trying to take home, specifically says, like, if you miss a payment, the animal can be repossessed. If something happens to the animal, you're still on the hook for the payments, things like that.
So wait a minute, let me interrupt you here. So that if Fluffy gets out of the house and runs into the street and is inadvertently involved in a fatal accident such that Fluffy crosses the Rainbow Bridge, does that mean that the consumer is still on the hook to make the remaining payments?
Unfortunately, that's what it does mean in these contracts, which are quite unfavorable for the people buying the pets. They are bound to make the payments, whether or not they still have the dog or cat in question, or parrot or ferret or whatever it might be.
So this really is like leasing a car.
Sadly, it is. People get attached to cars, but I think they get a little bit more attached to their pets. And so, if you're looking to buy a pet, be very careful. If you see an offer of you can pay for the pet over time.
Now, this seems at the very least like a controversial concept. Are states stepping in to do anything about this?
Fortunately, the answer is yes. Recently, both the state of California and the state of Nevada have passed bills that make it illegal to sign contracts for pet leasing. Basically, in California, it says a contract for the purchase of a dog or cat with payments over time is void as against public policy. So now, Barry, you do a lot of contract law. What kind of things would you advise somebody if they were looking at a contract?
Well, first, understand the contract. And if you don't understand the contract, invest a little bit in consulting with a qualified lawyer to be sure that you're not inadvertently leasing a pet instead of purchasing the pet on an installment plan. The other is to make sure you read the contract. I would imagine that some of these consumers were so enamored with Fido that they just signed where the pet store owner indicated and scooped up the pet and happily left the store, completely unaware that they were leasing a pet.
That is very true. Some of the stories about this talk about how people had no idea that they had signed a lease agreement for their animal, which is a really sad thing when you think about it. So
very much so.
That's it for today's episode. My name is Stephen Bergman.
And my name is Barry Shull.
And law is stranger than fiction.